9th SANEM Annual Economics Conference. Our first session today is Breakout Session 1, titled Macroeconomic Issues 2. As chair of the session, we have with us Mr. Dr. Mohammad Ejazul Islam, Director General, Bangladesh Institute of Bank and Bank Management, BIBM, and former Executive Director, Bangladesh Bank. As discussant, we have here with us Dr. Mohammad Din Islam, Professor of Economics, University of Dhaka, and Research Director, RAPID. We have 4 papers in this session. 3 of us have joined here, and 1 will be presenting online. The paper presentations will be by Dr. Bozlul Haq Khondokar, Chairman, SANEM, Mr. Ibrahim Hassan from University of Rajshahi, Ms. Ishrat Hussain, Director, SANEM, and Ms. Ayushma Manandhar, Predoctoral Researcher, Oxford Martin School, will be joining us online. Now I will hand over the microphone to our Honorable Chair. Thank you.
Very good morning to you all. Distinguished guests, respected scholar, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to all Breakout Session 1 on macroeconomic issues at the 9th SANEM Annual Conference 2026. I would like to thank SANEM to organize this important conference under the theme Development Challenges and Policy Response to a Changing World. Today's session is especially timely because Bangladesh, like many developing economies, is navigating a challenging macroeconomic environment marked by slower growth, elevated inflation, banking sector stress, external sector pressure, and difficult policy trade-off. The paper in this session examined 4 timely, highly relevant issues: demographic dividends, domestic wheat price in an import-dependent country, exchange rate regimes and foreign reserves, and the role of remittance in allocating resources. Together, these topics help us think more clearly about the policy choice facing Bangladesh in wider South Asian region. Our format will be simple. I will invite each presenter in sequence, following by comments from our discussion, Dr. M.D. Din Islam. If time permits, we may then take a few questions from the floor. With that, let us begin. May I now invite Dr. Khondokar Bozlul Haq, Chair, SANEM, for present his paper, please.
Good morning, Chair, and discussants and participants. This is a topic that why I want to, this is a new tool that we have been using to basically find out the relationship between population dividend and also economic growth and fiscal policies and budget and something like that. So since this is a lot of young researcher, I thought that we have been using, or you have been maintaining this NTA and NTTA for long, from 2014. And possibly most of you not encountered this new tool. So that's why my purpose is to actually introduce this tool to you and some of its use. And then you will find that globally, it has been now used by more than 100 countries. Bangladesh has been a late starter to this one, but at the SANEM, we have been associated with them from 2014. And we have done 2010 NTA, 2016 NTA. Currently, we are updating 2022 NTA. It needs a lot of data that will be clear to you soon. But what was the purpose of this one? The demographer and population expert has long been trying to find out association between economic growth and population dividend. And mostly, we all talk about demographic dividend, but there are various forms of population dividend, not only demographic dividend. I will talk about 3 demographic population dividend today using NTA and NTTA. So conventional, there has been a lot of model. We have been also used to cohort component model, SAM, CG model. I have been using SAM, CG model for long, and then also micro simulation model. But you will also see that there are, you don't find population in those kind of model. Or in the cohort component model, you will find population, but it gives you some idea about how long the demographic dividend will last. Mostly the first demographic dividend. We talk about that, so, but we don't know what is the contribution of that first demographic dividend into economic growth. So that's why the researcher at University of Hawaii and Berkeley, they have tried to find out, come up with a new tool that actually shows the link between economy and population. Okay, so look at the left-hand side. Some of you can't see that one. I'm sorry for that, but I think you can see that one. So what are the advantage of NTA called National Transfer Account, and NTTA is a derivation of NTA, is called National Time Transfer Account. That brings in time into the calculation. So what are the advantage of this one? NTA is a macro-consistent framework. Population and macro link is anchored on system of national accounts produced by UN system. Age structure, but what is it added that the sectoral or the macro aggregates are then distributed across age cohort, 0 to 100. So that brings in the new addition to the system. Then also through NTTA, it brings into gender disaggregation into the macro and population thing. Internationally comparable, more than 100 countries are doing that, and that the database is actually are used in the national, in the center, and they have been doing other works from that one. So, and it allows to capture full spectrum of demographic or population dividend, that is called first dividend, second dividend, and also gender dividend. So a lot of new issues are there in that one. So what are these one? Like if you see this one, this is an integrated population into economic accounting. So this is an accounting framework. It's not a, standalone framework, it's an accounting framework. And what does it show? It shows, it contents of labor income by different age cohort, macro-consistent labor income by different 0 to 100. You can see that who are the worker. So it will be basically from age 20 to 65, 67, depending on their on the retirement age. It also allows the consumption by different age cohort, 0 to 100. And then it also, you will find that, so the income and consumption are compared. So you'll find that some group will have deficit, some group have surplus, because their income is higher than consumption, and their income is lower than consumption. So basically, you will find a graph like this one, where you will find that the early children, early age, will have deficit, and elderly will have deficit, but the deficit by principle will be covered by the surplus generated by the working age population. And then, but we know that the surplus is not enough, so then you need transfer from government, transfer from family, and you also need asset accumulation for the retirement age, right? So that's the life cycle LCD they're talking about. Now, the NT expert, this is a graph that I've just explained, that it shows the deficit of the two tail and surplus on the middle. And NT expert, they claim that this is the most important graph of the world. I don't agree with that one, but this is an important graph to show that where are the deficit, how the surplus are generated, how that has been distributed, and its impact on the transfer, very important transfer, and also on the fiscal policy, right? Okay. Now, as I said, this is an accounting framework. You will find an inflow should be equal to outflow. And it brings in that the national macro data and also micro data into this framework. You will find that what are the inflows? Labor income, age-specific labor income, asset income, and then also transfer received by these households. And on the other hand, what are the outflows? Consumption, savings, and also transfer paid. Someone has to pay you. No, if you receive something, so someone has to pay the transfer. So this is the full accounting framework. Now, using this one, like a very basic graph, we can say that how we can define per capita income, Y by the population N, or the entire, like here, entire population or consumer, effective consumer, 0 to 100. And then we can also say that, okay, this is a function of like L by N, like the support ratio, and Y by L is the productivity, per capita output generated by the labor. So, as I said, L by N is the support ratio. And that is the one important part. Now, if you take the log form, you can find out that the growth of per capita income is actually function of growth of support ratio, that means the L by N, and also the growth of productivity. So that's where they have able to link the population with the, on the economic growth. Now, one can say that, like, if the number of workers are higher over consumer, you have a impact from the number of labor. So that's coming from the number of, number of workers are more than the number of population or consumer. So that is the first demographic dividend. And the second demographic dividend, that it started from the growth of the labor. Now, one thing is that first demographic dividend is not infinite, it is finite. In the case of Bangladesh, most probably all of you know that it will, I think, cease around 2023 or 33 or 34. I think I'll not be possibly able to finish everything. Now, with that NTA, once NTA done, what they have done is that they have bring in gender part of that one. They call it National Time Transfer Account. They have developed, or we have developed, a household account where the unaccounted, like the contribution of households member, mainly female and male also, are not accounted. What are these? Care services, household production, different kinds of production, and household consumption of the care services, and also household consumption, different kinds. So you can see that cooking, laundry, these are kind of household accounts. So they have actually included that one. These are not actually, as you know, not accounted by national accounts. You will never find the GDP of, like, the worker, unpaid worker, and then contribution. So that is another contribution to the system. I will go fast. Now, if you look at the result from the 2016 demographic, our NTA, the first demographic dividend started in Bangladesh in 1982. It will last 51 years. Like, it will be finished, I think, complete in cease to exit 2033, 2034. Meaning that we have already surpassed 75% of that one. Not knowingly, we have done that. So what are the contribution over the year, average contribution of first demographic into the per capita economic growth? We have found that the contribution is 0.72 percentage point, okay? Now, if you compare, this is not bad in isolation, but if you compare the Asia average, which is 1.38% per percentage point, if you look into China, it was 1.44 percentage point. More than double of Bangladesh. So what has happened? The Bangladesh, if you compare the regional average, we have been failed to actually reap the full benefit of the first demographic dividend. Okay. Now we have also linked this SAM and try to see what are the policy, what could have been the policy contribution of this one. I will not go detail of that one, but you will find the two things important is that Cambodia, Vietnam, and other countries are doing much better than us in terms of employment population ratio. So if you see that in Cambodia, it is 69%, in Vietnam, it was 67%, in the case of Bangladesh, it is 56%. So in contrast to that, so we're using that one, and Indonesia, they also try to estimate what are the unrealized first demographic dividend. So we also tried that approach and find that in 2010, our unrealized part of first demographic dividend, 2.5 trillion taka. In 2016, it increased by 43%, 3.6 trillion taka, meaning that if there are not effective policies, this will tend to increase. By 2034, possibly it will be 7 trillion taka that we have lost, not employing the labor into the productive employment, okay? Now, this I will skip because I think, and the another important part of NTA is that you can also estimate the second demographic dividend. Most people don't talk about second demographic dividend. That is the finite second dividend that we can generate from that one. But it will come from the productivity of labor. But that needs, like, the capital, skill development, lot of policies are associated with that one. Our estimate is that, like, the first, second demographic dividend, if we can do it properly with proper investment and productivity growth, it can generate 1.32 percentage point per capita GDP growth, so which is higher than the first demographic dividend. So in terms of policy, okay, we can say that okay, we could not do the first demographic dividend, but can we actually look into second demographic dividend? But meaning that the first if you are not able to reap the first demographic dividend, we will not be able to actually generate surplus that will be used for the second demographic. So they are interlinked. Okay, so this is another important outcome of the NTA. Now I will skip that one. The last point is that gender dividend. So they use the household, and we use the 2012 time use survey. One thing, as I said, we are also updating all the NTA and NTTA for 2022. Now you'll see that according to 2012 NTA, the loss of, or the value of unpaid work in terms of 2012 GDP was staggering. It was 57% or 58% of GDP. So how much actually time the female and the also very few male are actually devoted into the household and care services, which could have been like formalized, and you can have a care economy that will more formalize, and you can account for that one. The final three policy thing, what will we do? One is that the government, the current government is very ambitious. They said that more investment, the growth will be investment driven. Bangladesh has always been actually following an investment-led growth, but could not generate enough savings and investment for this one. So this is one, investment, higher investment, and export diversification, economic diversification needed to employ these workers effectively. Another important part, for the second demographic dividend and for the retired people, you need to have a pension system, well-functioning pension system, asset development. Bangladesh just started a national pension, universal pension, but it's very rudimentary form. But you need a lot of, policy, a lot of strategic development in that one. The very important generic is the human capital development. You need to put more money. The current government is dedicated. They claim that they will be able to spend 10% of GDP on education health. We'll see that, but if they can do that, that will be very important development in the context of Bangladesh. Number 4, care economy. There is a tremendous scope for developing a formal care service that will generate a lot of employment, employ mainly female, and it's a win-win for most of the countries. There is an ILO report that says that this is one of the major thrusts that we were following. Finally, youth entrepreneurship. Bangladesh, and like most of the countries, one of the major problems is youth employment. So we need to have specific youth budget, youth-specific program. Final point, so the NTA is actually counting what most of the other tools are actually missing. What is that? It gives the full story of the first and demographic dividend through NTA. It also provides a platform to capture the gender dividend, and it provides the full spectrum of population dividend. With that, I'd like to close. And for any question or if you want interest, I can provide a lot of material and also link that to the website where you can find a lot of interesting material. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very insight paper, and with policy brief. I think this paper will contribute a lot in future macroeconomic purpose, especially the population demographic dimensions. I welcome the presenter to forward is the coming budget discussion about the budget allocation, especially investment, demographic, youth entrepreneurship, and asset transformation. As you know, our banking sector not enough to capture the asset build up. So we are going to build up the capital market. We have studied a paper and submitted to the Minister of Finance. So all pension funds should be funded. So I think this paper maybe contribute to this regarding asset contribution and investment, export diversion. So we have a lot of opportunity to catch up that dividend. So momentum to growth up in future economy. So I now invite Mr. Ibrahim Hussain to present the paper modeling the determinant of domestic wheat price in an import-dependent economy and ARDL quantification analysis of Bangladesh. This topic is highly relevant in the current context of inflation, food security, and global commodity market uncertainty. Please, Mr. Ibrahim Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum. Good morning, respected teachers, chairs, discussants, and fellow presenters. My name is Ibrahim Hassan. I am from University of Rajshahi, Department of Economics. Currently, I am working as the Junior Research Associate at the Economic Research Group. Today, I am going to present my study titled as the Modeling the Determinants of Domestic Wheat Prices in an Import-Dependent Economy, an ARDL Co-Integration Analysis for Bangladesh. Thanks for being here. I'm going through my presentation as follows. I will begin with the introduction and motivation of this study, then outline the research objectives and questions. I will then show the empirical insights and research gaps, followed by the data overview. And then I will present my methodology, and I will show the unit root test results, lag order selection, bounds test, and the core short-run and long-run estimates. Then I will follow with the residual diagnostics, discussion recommendations, and conclusion. Let me begin with why wheat matters in Bangladesh. Although wheat contributes only 2.9% to national cereal production, domestic wheat consumption has been doubled since 1961 to 2013. As we can see, where it was only 8.62 kg in 1961, it increases to 17.47 in 2013. And urban consumption has exceeded the rural consumption, and it reflects the dietary shifts due to urbanization and convenience. When it comes to the supply side, wheat contributes only 2.9%, as we have already seen, and the cultivation area has declined in the last 10 years from 4,44,000 hectares to only 3,51,000 hectares, and it resulted that the rising demand cannot be met with the domestic production. And as a result, we have been heavily import dependent in the last 10 years or so. And 75% of our wheat consumption has made through imports. And it results a vulnerability in overall market due to the global crisis that we have seen in 2007-8 food crisis and the recent Russia-Ukraine war, where due to the increase of 31.6% global wheat price in international market, we have experienced 33% rise in domestic global wheat price. And these motivations lead directly to my research objectives. At first, I would like to examine the relationship between domestic wheat price fluctuations and global market dynamics, such as the international wheat prices, import volumes, and the exchange rate. And secondly, I would like to quantify the speed of short-run adjustments to the long-run equilibrium, and I would like to see how the overall impact of the variables that we are going to examine, the overall impact of those variables in our domestic price, and how the equilibrium actually works. The empirical insights slide, we can see that in the previous studies, liberalized exchange rates have been resulted as a significant agro-food market volatility, and especially during the 2008 food crisis. And also for the Bangladesh, the ARDL and error correction model showed that agricultural production is positively influenced by the rainfall and the agricultural value added in the long run. However, the combined effect of domestic wheat price on the combined effect of exchange rates, international wheat price and the import volume is yet to be understood, and my aim is to fill these gaps. I have used 4 data for my study. I have collected domestic wheat price data from the Food Planning and Monitoring Unit. Global wheat price data have collected from the Federal Reserve Economic Data, FRED. Exchange rate data has been collected by the World Bank data, and the import volume has been collected with the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA. All these 4 data sets were in monthly frequency so that the computation method is correct. At first, I would like to explain the autoregressive distributed lag ARDL model. Here, the lowercase l is basically the natural logarithms of the 4 variables: domestic wheat price, import volume, exchange rate, and global price respectively. Here, the core long-run relationship is basically can be expressed as the domestic wheat price is a function of the exchange rate, import volume, and global price. The second methodology here is the error correction model. Here, the lambda and del depict the immediate short-run impacts, where the theta is the long-run equilibrium. The phi is also known as the error correction term. It shows the speed of adjustments and how the short-run adjustment actually works in the real market. The bounds testing approach is what I am going to see in a minute. It tests for the long-run co-integration. It is applicable with a mixed integrated of order 0 and order 1 variables, and the null hypothesis is no long-run relationship exists. Before going to the ARDL estimates, I checked the stationarity of the variables using the augmented Dickey-Fuller tests. As we can see, all the variables are stationary at level. However, after differencing, all the variables became stationary at integrated of order 1 at the 1% significance level, and it justified the ARDL as there is no integrated of order 2 variables here. For the lag order selection and bounds tests, the left side table shows the 5 lag criteria that I have used. Here, the archaic information criterion, or AIC, shows that we can select ARDL 2002 model as the optimal model, and the lag 2 as the optimal lag, where we can estimate the results accurately. For the bounds test statistic is 3.7, where the critical values are 2.79 and 3.7 respectively for the integrated of order 0 and order 1. As the 3.7 is greater than 3.67, so we can reject the null hypothesis at 5% significance level and conclude that the variables of domestic wheat prices, international wheat prices, import volume, and exchange rates move along together in the long run. For the long run coefficients, we can see that the coefficient is 1.06. That means 1% depreciation in the exchange rate results more than 1% increase in the domestic wheat price. That means that we are going to see a complete pass-through effects in the exchange rate. For the global price, the coefficient is 0.59. That means 1% increase in the global price results 0.60%, which is also a significant result in terms of increasing the domestic price. Interestingly, import volume is only 0.14, which is not statistically significant, although it's positive. But for the short run, the error correction term is negative at minus 0.810, which means that 8.1% of disequilibrium is corrected, and the half-life of a shock is approximately 8 months. And exchange rate has an immediate effect when it comes to influence the domestic price. However, the global price has influenced the domestic wheat price with a 1 month lag. The thing that we can take from this slide is that import volume insignificance, and it suggests that there might be a supply chain inefficiencies when it comes to deal with the price surges that we experience. To validate the results, now I am presenting the residual diagnostics here. There is no serial autocorrelation as per the Bruce-Godfrey LM tests for lag 1 and 4, although there are some seasonal autocorrelation at lag 12, but it is expected for the monthly data. And also there is no heteroscedasticity for the ArchLM and white test results. Cumulative sum shows that the parameters are stable throughout the time period, and cumulative sum of squares shows that during the time of COVID-19 and Russia-Ukraine, where there are some deviations from the stable situation, but then it becomes then it returns to stability. So we can discuss from the overall findings is that we are experiencing a complete pass-through effects of exchange rates, and also global price has a significant impact, although it's not completely passed through. But the surprising finding is that import volume is not working when it comes to stabilizing the domestic price. Now the recommendations, first I would like to say that we need to mitigate the exchange rate risks by hedging mechanisms and using forex reserve management, and also we need to increase our domestic productivity, and also we need to find newer mechanisms so that we can find some climate resilient wheat genres in the next years or so. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim, for good paper about the inflation dynamics, how wheat price contribute from in terms of exchange rate and in terms of global price. So I think we open the floor after next paper presentation. So please. Now I would like to request Ms. Ishrat Hussain to present her paper, Implication of Exchange Rate Regimes for Foreign Reserves. This is a critical policy issue for countries like Bangladesh, where exchange rate management, reserve adequacy, and external sector confidence remain closely linked. Please, Ishrat.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, discussant, and participants. Good morning again, everyone. I am Ishrat Hussain, working at SANEM as a director. And today I will be presenting one of my research works on the implication of exchange rate regimes for foreign reserves, direct and indirect pathways through macroeconomic variables. So first, I will give you a little bit of background. Over recent decades, many countries, especially the emerging economies, have accumulated sizable foreign exchange reserves. And despite the severe COVID-19 pandemic, global reserves rose by roughly 4 to 6% before and during the pandemic. So with this background, I would like to describe this figure where this graph illustrates the rapid accumulation of reserves over the last 3 decades, with emerging market economies consistently holding a higher percentage of GDP in reserves compared to developing nations. So here comes the justification or the motivation of this research study. So it came to my mind when the foreign reserve of Bangladesh was experiencing a crunch, and there was a thought that whether the exchange rate regime or the exchange rate policy has any impact on the foreign reserve of countries like Bangladesh, like the emerging economies. So while I was reviewing the literature, I saw that much literature examines how reserves influence exchange rates, far less analyzes how exchange rate regimes shape reserve accumulation. Here point to be noted is exchange rate and exchange rate policy or regime are two different variables, since exchange rate is the price of the currency in terms of other currencies, and exchange rate regime is the policy to manage exchange rate. So my hypothesis was the exchange rate policy or the decisions of the governments, how the exchange rate will be moderated, might have impact on the foreign reserve. So because I thought that maintaining a fixed exchange rate is challenging, as it suppresses the natural adjustment channel, forcing coordinated shifts in monetary inflation, interest rate, and openness policies, which could affect foreign reserve in the long run. So with this motivation, I started to build up the model, and with reviewing a lot of literature, I decided that I will use the panel nonlinear country fixed effect model with interaction terms. Since to keep any kind of exchange rate, like fixed, floating, or pegged exchange rate, certain macroeconomic decisions need to be made that further impact a country's foreign reserve. Related macroeconomic indicators have been used here as the buffer variables. Also, the impact of exchange rate regime on foreign reserve could be both direct and indirect. So along with the direct effects, this research looks for the indirect or buffer effects of the exchange rate regime on the foreign reserve by adding interaction terms for each potential buffer macroeconomic variable. So here is the basic regression equation, where I will discuss it in the next slide. So the 1 year lagged value of reserve here has been used as an independent variable to deal with the autocorrelation problem and to capture the dynamic effect. All control variables are lagged by 1 year to capture delayed macroeconomic policy responses. Wall tests have been used to evaluate additional lags, and an added lag is kept only when the joint significance test supports its inclusion. So these lags basically mitigate reverse causality according to literature, because interest rate, inflation, reserve, or these kind of macroeconomic variables, they actually affect each other, and they're correlated with each other. That's why we might have reverse causality problem. To mitigate the issue, I have used lagged values. Okay, so exchange rate regime dynamics here has been represented with exchange rate growth rather than with regime dummy variables, because whereas some countries have announced fixed or floating or pegged exchange rate regime or policy, in reality they act according to their needs. To capture that reality, I have used the exchange rate growth as representing the regime. So this country fixed effect regression has been run for 175 countries, along with separate regression for developed and developing groups using United Nations HDI and GNI classifications. So here there are a little bit of description how I have used the variables. What variables I have used as the buffer variables, for example, current account, trade openness, broad money, financial openness, which is represented by K-Open index, and FDI, along with GDP per capita and government expenditure. So here I want to mention that while running the regression, 5 models have been carried out. 3 models have been carried out to adjust the heteroscedasticity robust standard errors that adjust the variance covariance matrix. And among these 3 regressions, one is pooled regression for both developed and developing countries, and 2 and 3 are for developing and developed countries. In the same way, I have run 2 more regression where regression 4 and 5, I used the standard errors clustered at the country level to allow heteroscedasticity and serial correlation with countries over time. So here are the empirical results. I will not describe point by point. Rather, I am trying to conclude as a story. So we have estimated the direct effect and also the indirect effect with the interaction terms. While we are discussing about the direct effect, we said that reserves are highly persistent. And in the pool sample, higher lagged exchange rate growth slightly reduces reserves, and it is and there are flipping of the direction of impact in developed and developing countries, whereas in developing countries, reserve to GDP ratio falls if exchange rate growth rises. That is when when the exchange rate growth rises, it affects the developing country in a different way in comparison with the developed countries. So in developing countries, FDI, current account, and trade raise reserves. And I'm not saying point by point what percentage they are adding. Inflation significantly affects reserves in developed economies, whereas the lending rate is negatively associated with reserves only in the pooled regression. And several controls show no clear direct effect. For example, financial openness, broad money, or government expenditure. Interestingly, the variables which do not have direct effect, we will see that they have indirect effect on the foreign reserve. So interaction terms between exchange rate growth and buffer variables are significant for lending interest rate, broad money to GDP, gross national expenditure, and current account to GDP, indicating that exchange rate growth moderates their links to reserve accumulation. So the primary hypothesis that exchange rate growth or exchange rate policy affect the overall macroeconomy, which affect the foreign reserve in the long run, I have found some significant results supporting that hypothesis. For example, for broad money, exchange rate growth strengthens the negative M2 reserve link in developing countries and weakens the positive M2 reserve link in developed countries, with effects that scale with the size of exchange rate changes. So I'm not describing all the result. I'm directly going to the concluding remarks. So direct effects differ by development status. We can see higher exchange rate growth is associated with falling reserve in developing economies, but rising reserves in developed ones, helping explain the prevalence of floating regimes in advanced countries. In developing economies, trade openness, current account, and FDI are positively associated with reserves. In developed economies, inflation is the main significant driver, aside from exchange rate growth. Most importantly, here, indirect channels matter. With more flexible exchange rate, the negative broad money to reserve link in developing economies can lessen, while in developed economies, flexibility dampens the usual positive M2 reserve link. Similar asymmetries appear for lending rates and government expenditure, and the current account effect strengthens only for developed countries when exchange rate growth rises. So what is the policy takeaway from this study? So regime choice meaningfully conditions reserve accumulation, both directly and through macro-financial buffers, and the emerging economies like Bangladesh should consider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Very nice presentation about the recent exchange rate management and reserves. As you see, in our country, we have passed many regimes since independence. After independence, we have packed with dollar, pound sterling. Then we switched to the US dollar in 1978. and then we crawling back, then we current account open in 1994, then we manage plot 2023, and with market intervention dependent supply regimes. So in contrast this paper, the policy brief about the reserve maintaining and exchange rate management is very important for in an inflation and interest rate. So if you maintain the low price stable, you should raise the policy rate. Then if you maintain the policy rate, then the reserve production and exchange rate stability very important. So we have experience gathered last 18 months, and before that, the political regimes, then there is a fixed exchange rate almost per taka 86. Then a long time we maintain the exchange rate, then we lose the reserves. Then after the regime shift, then we raise the policy rate, then we exchange rate overshooting, we manage the flexibility, then exchange rate stabilize about 122 and 223. Then the reserves again build up. So we have practical experience in the Bangladesh context, very nice. So I think you have some, I think discussion will discuss about the cover your methodology, the research paper, but I did not found any your, how the regimes you maintain in the pool data and fixed effect. So you cover 127 countries. How many countries are regime fixed and how many countries are floating? So I think I don't know, understand your paper, but empirically your result is very good. So thank you. Now we switch to our last paper. I think this paper will be presented online. Our final paper will be presented by Ms. Ashuman Manandra on how remittance reallocate resources, quasi-experiment evidence from Nepal. Although the study focus on Nepal, the subject is highly relevant for Bangladesh, where remittance flow remain an important macroeconomic stabilizer. So, Ms. Manandar, are you online? Okay. Okay. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can see my screen. All right. Good morning. So today I'm presenting my research paper on the topic how remittances reallocate resources, quasi-experimental evidence from Nepal. So starting off, remittances are the largest source of external finance in low and middle income countries today. They far exceed official development aid, and as of recent years, they have been exceeding foreign direct investment as well. Particularly if we look at South Asia, remittances have always been quite significant in terms of external finance, far exceeding development aid and foreign direct investment. However, it is striking that we know very little about how remittances shape economic development in these recipient economies. So there's a large body of economics literature that talks about the more of micro level effects of remittances or household level effects, about how they help in poverty reduction, increased education, financial resilience, these kinds of things. But if we look at studies that talk more about aggregate economic outcomes, such as investment or consumption, GDP growth, prices, etc., we see that the effects are inconclusive. And I mean, on the one hand, it could be because remittances have very complicated effects on the macroeconomy, but it also could be because of lack of power in purely macroeconomic analysis. When we're conducting cross-country analysis using national aggregates and time series data, there might be measurement errors, and most importantly, endogeneity problems where remittances data are not available at the required granularity for us to be able to recognize or make causal claims. And so in recent studies, we find that quasi-experimental methods in subnational settings are quite popular. So here I mentioned 3 important papers that my research was inspired by. So there's a paper in Philippines that uses exchange rate shocks generated during the Asian financial crisis, and they look at district level outcomes in Philippines. And similarly, there's a paper in Sri Lanka where they use similar subnational divisions and shift share instrument design. There's also a paper in Malawi that uses a policy shock as like this quasi-experimental setting to see how employment and structural transformations took place. So in my paper, I focus on one specific dimension of economic development, and that's structural transformation. So movement of resources from low productivity sectors to high productivity sectors. Typically, when we're talking about economic development, this would mean from agriculture to manufacturing or services. So this is generally considered a very important part of the economic development process itself. And so specifically, my research question is, do remittances shift economic activity from agriculture to manufacturing or services? I'm looking at the case of Nepal, and I do a district level analysis. And by economic activity, I'm mainly looking at two outcomes, so employment and firm formation. And I'm using an instrumental variable method, sorry. Okay, so to give you a very quick context of Nepal, foreign employment and remittances have been central to Nepal's economy, with annual remittance inflows that are consistently over 25% of the GDP. I'm sure this is very similar to the case of Bangladesh and many South Asian countries. And another thing to note is that foreign employment is quite regulated, and usually they're based on fixed term contracts between the employer and the employee. And by regulated, I mean that they're formal. And so people will migrate to primarily Gulf or East Asian countries with the help of labor permits. And this is the most dominant form of foreign employment. And further, there is district level variation in migration patterns and economic outcomes. So this makes Nepal a very interesting study or case to do this study. Okay, I'll quickly talk about how I get the data that I need. So my main explanatory variable is district level remittances. Now, a problem with most studies in remittances is that it's very hard to get granular data on remittances. Usually we only have national level aggregates. However, I use the fact that migrant workers need to obtain work permits in order to estimate district level remittances. I won't go into much detail here in the interest of time, but generally speaking, I have data on how many labor permits were issued by a particular district in a particular year for a particular destination country. And so this allows me to get estimates for district level remittances at the year level. Okay, and so one of my first main outcome variable is the sector of employment. Again, this is not usually available at the district level. So I use different rounds of nationally representative household surveys to estimate this. So I use labor force surveys, household surveys, living standard measurement survey, and a good thing is that all of these surveys ask respondents about their sector of employment in this past 7 days. And so this allows me to create a panel that covers a significant time period from 2008 to 2018. Right, but there are some caveats with this data. For example, the recall period is quite short, and all the districts are not always included. These are different surveys, and so, but regardless of that, this gives me enough data to construct the panel. So my second outcome variable is the sector of employment. So for this, I have a much richer data. This is an administrative data on every single firm that was ever registered in the country. So this is over 100,000 firms. So this data includes the name of the firm, the year the firm was registered, and the district of registration. However, it does not include the sectoral classification. for all firms, but for a subset of the firms, about 10,000, I have the sectoral classification. And so I develop a machine learning algorithm that will predict the sector of a firm based on its name. So this actually works really well because firms' names are very descriptive. You know, for example, if it's a hospital, the word hospital is usually in there. If it's a factory or if it's a mill, then there are words that describe this within the firm's name. And so this machine learning algorithm works really well. So with this, I'm able to measure the sector of firms for all the 100,000 firms. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is kind of what the firm data looks like. As you can see, this covers like a very large time period from 1980 to 2020, basically. And you can see how service sector firms boom relative to agriculture and manufacturing firms. So this is for the entire national level, but I have this for district level as well. Okay, so with this data, a very basic OLS specification would look something like this, where you have the main outcome variable, remittances, the main explanatory variable, and controls, and then a bunch of fixed effects. However, a big problem with this is that endogeneity. It's not fair to compare districts that have a lot of migration with districts that don't have a lot of migrations. There might be unobservable characteristics. So there's omitted variable bias, or there might be reverse causality. And so a simple OLS doesn't work. And so I turn to an instrumental variable. So this is a very basic shift share style instrumental variable. Again, I won't go into much detail, but the general idea is that there's a shift component and then there's a share component. So the shift is a shock that affects all districts in my case. So I use the Nepali currency to the US currency exchange rate for this, because this is something that's external to Nepal. It's driven by global financial conditions and macroeconomic factors. However, it affects remittances received, or the value of remittances received, and thus migration patterns for all districts. And so my share is some measure of historical migration patterns. So I use distance to 17th century Gorkha recruitment centers. So just a bit of a quick background. In the 17th century, the British started recruiting Nepali soldiers for their army through two key recruitment centers that were located near the Nepali border. So this was one of the earliest forms of foreign employment for Nepal. And turns out, even today, proximity to these recruitment centers explains migration patterns. So districts that are closer to recruitment centers experience more migration and receive more remittances even today. And so the migration patterns persist. And I use this in the instrument because the location of these recruitment centers were largely based on British logistical considerations rather than Nepal's geographical or economic conditions. And I use straight line distances. So here you can see the red dots are the two recruitment centers, and the blue shading represents remittances received. And as you can see, even today, or in recent years, districts that are closer to these centers receive more remittances. And so with the help of these two components, I construct my instrument like so. And this is my preferred specification, which is...
Your time is over. However, within 2 or 3 minutes, you please give your result, please.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I just need 2 minutes. Okay, so these are my results. So the first here, you can see the effects of remittances on the sector of employment. I will only go through the two SLS estimates. So the only significant effect I see is on manufacturing employment. There's suggestive evidence that remittances increase manufacturing employment. And then here, remittances decrease formation of agricultural firms and increases formation of service sector firms. And so Generally, in conclusion, I find that remittances lead to a decrease in the formation of agriculture firms, an increase in employment in manufacturing, and an increase in service sector forms. So the findings suggest that remittances facilitate structural reallocation or structural transformation, and this offers new evidence on the potential role of migration and remittances in developing countries. Thank you.
Ms. Aishma. So I have a question to you about your exchange rate management. So your paper I read last night, it's a very nice paper. You are going to submit a dissertation. So you show there. So when the remittance service sector or manufacturing to service sector, non-tradable sector, so currencies appreciation. So since Nepal currency is pegged with Indian currency, how you evaluate it, I don't know, but you take this point and seriously thinking about the exchange rate management of Nepal. So how you use US to Nepal currencies, but your currency paid with Nepal, Indian. So migrate remittance your farm to tradable to non-tradable, then exchange rate appreciate, how it link. You explained clearly in your paper. Thank you. So thank you all for presenter. Now I'd like to invite our discussion, Dr. M.D. Din Islam, for his insightful on paper. Please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I would like to congratulate all the paper presenters. These are very interesting research. So what I will share here is some observation based on the presentation. And this observation may already be addressed in the paper because we don't have full paper for few of the presentations. So the comment will be based on the presentation. I will go by the order of presentation. The first presentation, Dr. Bozullah Khandoga sir. A very nice work, very interesting topic, and it's also very new for me that there is another technique of estimating demographic dividends. And you rightly pointed out there are a number of limitations for existing methodologies. But I think the NTA methodology also, NTA or NTTA methodology also relies on very strong assumption. For example, it heavily depends on cross-sectional age profiles applied to changing population structure, and it assumes age-specific pattern of consumption, labor income, and transfer remain constant. So I think for a country like Bangladesh, for a very rapidly developing country, this is a very strong assumption because in Bangladesh, educational enrollment, labor force participation, and elderly care pattern are changing quickly. And we don't see any sensitivity analysis on checking this assumption, whether this age-specific pattern of consumption, labor income, and care work pattern will remain constant for sufficient amount of time. The other thing is that the simulation result, especially for first demographic dividend, you pointed out that if you can increase investment from 23% to 30%, employment will have increased employment by 9.4%. And this will bring larger demographic dividend. But the thing is that we didn't see any linkage between SAM-based simulation and the NTA framework, and it's not clearly explained, and how this additional investment translate into age-specific employment. are the new jobs assumed to go to prime age workers in the same proportion as the current employment? And without a structural model, macro model, I think it's difficult to disentangle this impact. And if we don't have this structural model, age disaggregated labor income, then the results are actually just stylized assumption. They are not actually, the output are not actually the causal impact or estimate. So I think if the paper provides some confidence interval or alternative scenario with different elasticities, then we can actually have some idea that how this estimate differ. The next thing about this paper is the concern about the valuation. So it shows that 57.7% of GDP is unpaid care work, which 45.6% contributed by women and 12.1% by men. So this valuation depends on imputed wage. You pointed out that you use imputed wage for care workers and household production using market replacement cost. But it does not specify whether replacement cost uses general domestic worker wage or specialized care worker wage or opportunity cost of time. Each of these measure or imputed wage would provide very different unpaid care work estimation. So I think if you have this alternative valuation technique, then it would be interesting to see how this valuation differ. And the second demographic dividend, you show some results, also depends on long-run assumption about pension wealth and productivity. You showed us that the pension wealth need to grow from 1 times labor income in 2024 to approximately 5 times in 2100, and this requires sustained 3% pension wealth growth for nearly 50 years. But the thing is that we don't have any mature pension institution, and we have very large informal economy. So given this background, I think it would be very difficult to achieve this 3% sustained growth in pension wealth. The results, I think, is a very heroic, I would say, the estimation, given the current structural macroeconomic condition of Bangladesh. So these are my few observations. I think you have already in some way addressed this in your paper. Then the next paper by Ibrahim Hassan. So your paper, I think, there's a number of data issue, I guess, in your paper. The first one is the bound test. So in your paper, you actually provide the full paper. The null of no co-integration is actually rejected in finite sample in 5% level of significance. And also in infinite sample, it's marginally not rejected in 5% level. So it's not very clear whether there is any long-run relationship between these two variables. And the other thing is that you showed us that all of your variables are measured in monthly frequency. But the thing is that USDA, it actually does not provide input data in monthly frequency. So you might have imputed or converted yearly data into monthly. And if, I don't know what is the method of imputing this. And you can see that the import coefficient is also does not have correct sign. It is actually, it shows positive, but someone would expect that if you have larger import, then the price would go down. The relationship supposed to be negative. So I think you need to check whether this variable is measured correctly or not. Then chair actually saying that this is also a concern that we are not sure why you are actually using ARDL. Why not simple co-integration since all of your variables are I1? And also there is a number of omitted variable. You just included import, but there is in your paper, 25% are coming from the domestic sources. So domestic production is also a determinant of supply. You didn't include that. The government actually actively participate in this market. It procure from domestic market and also do the open market sale. And there is an informal cross-border trade between India and Bangladesh. So if you don't include those variable or some proxy of this variable, all of your coefficient actually would be biased, and there is no actually way to draw any meaningful conclusion. Especially, I'm very surprised to find your adjustment coefficient, error correction coefficient, which is only about 8.1%. Since wheat is a staple food and government actually intervene in this market, so someone would expect that the adjustment will be very quick, not like 8% every month. So I think the omitted variable is a problem in your model, and this actually giving you biased results. So if you check the data and check your model specification, I think that will improve the robustness of your results. Then I move to the next paper by Mrs. Israt Hussain. Again, for this paper, I think the measurement issue is a big issue. So you said that the title is implication of exchange rate regime for foreign reserve. But what you actually estimating is impact of exchange rate depreciation or growth on foreign exchange reserve. It's not the impact of regime. So there are some other way to classify the exchange rate regime, like IMS de facto classification or Raynaud-Rogoff scale. So if you don't use those regime, if you just use the percentage change in exchange rate, in that case, a country with a fixed exchange rate may have zero or very low exchange rate growth. Also, a floating exchange rate regime can have very low exchange rate growth during the period of calm and stability. So you cannot differentiate between these two regimes. So the paper does not actually answer the stated question, how exchange rate regime affect foreign exchange reserve. Instead, it answered how exchange rate movement affects reserves. So I think you need to either change the title or you need to use the alternative classification. The second problem is the reverse causality, even though you said that you included the lag of the dependent variable to control the reverse causality. But the thing is that foreign exchange reserve and exchange rate are jointly determined, and central bank actively use reserves to intervene in currency market. And selling reserve to defend a currency or buying reserve to prevent appreciation. 1 year lag actually does not solve the reverse causality because exchange rate expectations or pressure can manifest within months, not year. So if you just include a 1 year lag, that won't solve the reverse causality problem. Another one is data problem again. You classified the country between developed and developing using UN HDI or GNI classification. I think for your research question, this classification is not very suitable. For example, within developing country, the financial market or capital account openness, financial sector debt, or monetary policy credibility, these are widely varied within each of these groups. For example, China has very controlled capital market, whereas Chile has a very open capital market floating regime with inflation targeting, but you are bunching them together. So this grouping, I think, is not appropriate. If you can use a more informative approach to classify these economies, then it would be more appropriate for this result. And other thing is that I'm not sure how you are choosing the variable, because you have current account over GDP log of 1 plus current account over GDP ratio. Also you have log of 1 plus trade GDP ratio, that they are highly correlated. Trade GDP ratio would be almost perfectly correlated with current account of GDP ratio. So it would be very useful if you can provide some reason of choosing this variable. And the other thing is that you need to include the time trend. Otherwise, all of these variables may not be very, the result may not be very useful and causal. The final one is a very interesting paper. Sorry, maybe I'm taking too long. I'll finish in 2-3 minutes. It's a very interesting paper. I would just make a few comments about the instrument you are using. So the instrument you are using assumes that the British Gurkha recruitment depot affects today's service sector farm formation only through remittances. So this exclusion restriction is not very plausible. District closer to this depot may have historically better infrastructure, stronger government presence and higher literacy, and all of which could independently encourage farm creation and farm location. These district fixed effect only absorb time invariant confounders and identifying variation coming from interaction with time varying foreign GDP. The core threat is that foreign demand shock might correlate with unobserved district level trends. You actually did some pre-trend testing in appendix, but I think more appropriate would be to do some placebo regression on outcomes, if outcomes unlikely to be affected by remittances would actually strengthen your credibility of your result. Also, the constructed instrument variable, you imputed district level remittances by multiplying labor permit by global average remittances per migrant from each destination country. It actually assumed that migrants from all districts sent home identical amount, ignoring difference in skill, duration, and informal transfer channel. If district closer to recruitment center send higher skilled or longer staying migration, your regression might suffer from measurement error, which may not be classical, and this actually make your regression, the causality will break there. You need to test this assumption. And finally, I'll make one final comment, is that the your first stage result in some regression, you have like negative adjusted R square, so which actually shows that the validity of your instrument is not very strong. So in addition to running the pre-trend regression, it would be extremely useful if you can do some placebo test and show that your instrument is valid. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. M.D. Din Islam, for very valuable comments, insight, and I think the presenter will include this. Now, we have only 10 minutes, so I would like to request I would like to open the floor from audience. Please, if you have any questions, specific paper, please raise your hand and name, then ask the specific. Then we have taken 3 or 5 questions, then we open the presenter to respond, if time allows. Please. So, use mic, please.
Assalamu alaikum, good morning. This is Dr. Faisal. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Ibrahim Hassan about his paper. He is talking about the determinants of domestic wheat prices. So when you talk about the determinants of price and something, so that's, in that case, we always talk about the complementary goods or something like substitute goods. So in that case, in Bangladesh case, rice is actually our substitute goods to some extent of wheat. So have you considered this rice price in your model or something like that? Can you clarify this?
Thank you. The next. So you have no question, then we go to the presenter. At first, I would like to, Dr. Bajula Khondagar, please respond quick about the discussion. Thank you.
Chair and Dean also for very constructive comments on the paper. So I think this was a paper done for Planning Commission as a background paper. They wanted to see the population dividend and the economic growth and other issues also. It was funded by UNFPA, so I was not be able to disclose the full paper, but if the Dean wants, we'll be able to share that one. But some of the comments are well taken. I think that one of the issues that we found is that the data availability. Some of the data comes from the administrative sources. So it is not very easy to actually have high frequency NTA countries like Bangladesh. So you see that what I understand from that, there are a lot of dynamics. I mean, the population dynamic is also happening very fast in Bangladesh. So if you have a lag, so you cannot capture all the dynamics in the, I understand that. And we take that issue also, but also dictated by the availability of data. So why we take 2022? Because we have most of the data that we use for NTO to update the NTA and also NTTA. So that's one limitation from our side, but one thing that we are more confident that the first demographic dividend estimates are quite robust. But in terms of the second demographic dividend, I understand this is a potential. And also informality, and we have a very nascent pension system that just started like 2023, should have been started long back, but, and also like the saving first issue is not very popular in Bangladesh. So in that case, it will be really challenging that, okay, this is the potential that you can actually achieve, but it needs a lot of effort on the government side in terms of policy effort. And we see that within the 3 years, there was no much like the growth of national pension system. So it's very, I mean, flat growth. So why? Because there are a lot of issues that hasn't been like captured, or they did not do any survey in terms of win index survey, the trust is not there. So a lot of issues are there. So I think that whether we can move from the current approach to first saving first approach and then try to build the pension fund, which is needed. I mean, if you build a pension fund, this will be a tremendous like source of investment in the case of Bangladesh. If you go globally, the pension fund basically, if you look at Norwegian pension fund, Canadian pension fund, even in Asia, you will find that Singapore has a lot of, very developed pension fund. Even Malaysia, Indonesia is doing much better than us. So there is scope. But it's not easy. I mean, it will not happen automatically. I think first demographic dividend is to some extent automatic, but you need policy support. Second demographic dividend, you need much more policy intervention in that one. With that, I like to close. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to request Mr. Ibrahim Hassan, please, if you have any response.
Thanks. First, I would like to answer your question. I did not take into consideration the impact of considering the price of rice as the substitute goods of wheat. Actually, the paper I have presented here was part of my master's thesis that I have done during my academic career. And at that time, I was entirely focusing on wheat because of the rising demand that we have seen over the last 5 or 10 years. In terms of rice, the domestic production is almost covering 80 to 85% of our domestic demand. So for that particular good, we are not really experiencing too many import related stuffs that we are experiencing for wheat. So that is one of the reasons why I did not consider rice when it comes to the other source of carbohydrate or calorie. So that is your question. And for the import data, yes, the main data source was the USDA, and that data source was yearly. So when it comes to transform that into monthly data, I just tried to make a generalized estimation, and that might get a biased result when it comes to get the estimation. So.
Thank you, Mr. Ibrahim. Now I would like to request Ishrat Hussain, if you have within 1 minute.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Discussant, for your valuable comments. I will definitely, it will definitely add value to my paper, and I will try to address the issues. For better clarification, the question that both the Chair and Discussant raised, the exchange rate growth, does it really represent the exchange rate regime? So the reason I use exchange rate growth to capture the real picture of a country's exchange rate behavior, whether it is market-based or floating exchange rate, or whether it is pegged. I try to capture this picture by the exchange rate growth, that highly volatile exchange rate growth might represent a market-based exchange rate regime, whereas the low growth of exchange rate might represent the fixed or pegged exchange rate regime. However, I will look into the issue, and I will try to justify this exchange rate growth, or I will look into the issue more. And about how the buffer variables are chosen, I have used a lot of literature review to choose the buffer variables. And yes, all these variables are somehow correlated with each other. I tried to address this issue by using the lagged variables. And about the developed and developing countries classification, there were 27 developed and 93 developing countries, and basically I used this classification to capture the similarities of financial sector rather than the exchange rate regime. But thank you for the comments. I will definitely work on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishrat. I would like to request Ayushman. Are you online, Ayushman? So, उन्हीं क्या से online? No. So thank you. So let me conclude by thanking all presenters and our discussion for an excellent session. Today's papers taken together remind us that macroeconomic policy is not only about short-term stabilization. It is also about building the foundation for resilience and long-term development. The first paper points us towards the opportunity and urgency of converting demographic changes into a proactive dividend. The second, underscore the importance of managing food price vulnerability in an import-dependent country. The third brings attention to the policy trade-off surrounding exchange rate regimes and reserve adequacy. The fourth, highlight the broader development role of remittance in reallocating resources and supporting economic adjustment. These themes are highly relevant for Bangladesh at this moment. The country continues to face elevated inflation, weak revenue mobilization, banking sector stress and lack of good governance, and incomplete exchange rate adjustment. At the same time, slower growth, energy-related external pressures, food price sensitivity, and financial sector weakness continue to shape the macroeconomic outlook. Against this backdrop, the broad policy message is straightforward. Bangladesh needs macroeconomic management that is disciplined, credible, and forward-looking. That means restoring price stability, strengthening the banking system, improving revenue effort, managing the exchange rate and reserve prudently, containing food and energy vulnerability, and making the most of demographic and remittance-related opportunities. I hope this session contribute to the larger policy conversation. I thank SANEM for organizing this important conference, thank our presenters and discussion once again, and thank the audience for their attention and engagement. With that, I would like to formally close this session. Thank you all. Thank you.